Spencer, we are live. Really good to see you. Thank you so much for joining us today. For those that are listening, welcome. Thank you for joining us. It's just gone 1:30, and today is my huge pleasure to welcome Mr. Spencer Gallagher to join us. Spencer, thank you for giving up your time. I know you're a busy guy. For those that are listening, watching, please do keep your comments coming in. I'll try and get through as many as possible. But today we're really going to tackle the subject of leadership, because actually as an agency owner and co-founder, what I find most challenging at the moment is some of the topics around leadership. And so, Spencer, having worked with hundreds of agencies before, let's dive in. From what you've seen, what makes a good agency leader?
Wow, I could probably spend 3 months answering that question. So I'll try and sort of summarize it as best I can. I think, first of all, I think no one really becomes ever a great leader. Like, I think there is, not a fudge answer here, but it is a continual evolution moving forwards. I think experience plays a major part in good leadership. I feel that too many people, because they get given the title of leader or they start a business, think that suddenly they're a great leader, right? But to become a great leader, it takes a long time. It takes a lot of experience. You can't just read 5 books and become an expert in leadership overnight. You have to have lived it and breathed it. But what makes an agency leader good? Well, I think I tend to always sort of start by saying, what is leadership? Because I guess there's different levels. Like, we can talk today about maybe the founders and the owners of agencies. From their perspective, leadership is vision. Is culture. There's also an element of sales in there, and there is, and of course, leadership. And so that leadership needs you to be able to, because you can have a vision. Most of founders of agencies have a vision, but you need the culture to deliver on that vision. And the leadership part is the bit that bridges the vision and the culture, from my perspective. It's the bit that glues it together, that gets the team, your team, rather than, working, for you because they have to, working for you because they want to. And if you can get that transition to happen, and how does a leader get that to happen? I mean, it's a series of steps and stages. I'm quite, in some ways, because I've been around a few years now, and I've been a leader since I was 17 years old, and I've been, that's 33 years I've been leading. And so I've been through so many different situations, experience, and seen things, what works, what doesn't work. The things that I think that makes a great leader is, first of all, I would say it's the, like when I go into agencies and businesses, you meet 2 types of people. You meet the people that know everything and know nothing. And actually, the more that you learn, the more you realize, the more that you know, the more that you realize what you don't know. And so I think a great leader is someone who doesn't think they know everything, is still understands that journey of learning, is able to be themselves and not take a persona, not become a narcissist, not become an egotistical psychopath. It's someone who can just be the authentic version of themselves and inspire the people around them in their business to be the best version of themselves. And I think that some of those things I fired at you is quite a lot in one short go, but it's, there are some good characteristics of good leaders, but I think that it's certainly a journey of learning and discovery.
Spencer, I've got a couple of questions that have come out the back of this. One is around the fact that leadership is absolutely exhausting. And you mentioned there you've been leading since you're 17 years old. How have you dealt with the times where you just want to eat Cheerios in your pants and not be leading a load of people that are expecting you to always have the answer, always know what to do, always be able to get you out of a tough situation? What do you do in those times?
I mean, let's be clear about this as well, just so everyone out there who thinks that, there are these bulletproof people that are invincible. That just doesn't happen, right? So I have down days. Speak to my wife. I have down days as much as anybody. My job is to lift people up and keep them motivated and happy. And and every day I have to take a difficult phone call from someone who's in a difficult place, struggling. And so the reality is that, you know, life is a roller coaster. It is full of ups and downs. I know most of you know that, but, you know, it's the acceptance of, and I wrote a post this recently, is actually just being, you know, being honest enough to admit that and not sit there trying to put a brave face on and fronting everything out, which is, you know, probably a thing that my generation used to do very, very well. You know, in the early days of working, everyone would just brave these things out and front it out. But the reality is we all have downturns. And the way you deal with it, Nathan, I think is, the first thing I'd probably say is I'd urge everyone to do. And I think something actually that we're doing at Cactus now, like we're bringing it in now as almost like a sort of a standard entry level requirement to work with us, is an EQ test. And we do the EQ test, do the emotional intelligence test, so that we can understand what your level of self-awareness is, not just your empathy levels, because you need good empathy to be a good leader. But the reality is that, you know, these are skills that you can work on and improve. And, you know, I've been fortunate because I've had high levels of self-awareness. You know, sometimes I may lack certain other areas. I'm not strong in every area on the emotional intelligence scale, but those areas I'm not so good at, I work at to be better. But the self-awareness thing helps, Nathan, because it helps you understand when you're getting close to burning out, or you're aware when your behavior changes. Because sometimes, you know, one of the things you often hear me talk about is the importance of holidays and breaks. And in fact, we had a chat not that long ago after, you know, you were going through your period of craziness, where I said I'm a bit worried, because there's me being empathetic, because the reality is that, you know, every September, Pete and we manage our diaries for the whole year ahead. So we understand that every 3 to 4 weeks, running a business and running, you know, 100 million quid's worth of client businesses, that we get to a point where we're near burnout. So we regularly take breaks. We regularly plan those in advance so that they happen. Those breaks may be in the UK and may just involve me walking 10 miles a day, or, as was last week, go to Bournemouth for a couple of days, or it may be a holiday abroad. But certainly the importance of regular, consistent breaks and spreading them out, and not, you know, saving your holiday up for 1 month at the end of the year and things like that. And if you want to be a good leader, you have to be very self-aware about your mental condition. And I think, you know, there's a lot of talk spoken about mental health, and, you know, in businesses today. And I think, you know, some of that self-management is look, it's a very complex subject, but some of the self-management is really important. That self-awareness, to recognize your individual signs when things are getting bad. And, you know, I hit, you know, my head turns to brain fog usually after about 6 weeks of board meetings. And then I need to have a long weekend or a week off to just reset. And in fact, I woke up this morning, I had a week off last week, and I you know, consciously knew that my brain was clear of fog for the first time in quite a while, because I think I've been out, you know, I was out a lot last week, and I went back into board meetings this week. And whereas most of us, as we all know, have been trapped inside for many months. So to answer your question a very long way, I would say the self-awareness is very important. And I think there are many other benefits to emotional intelligence tests and EQ tests that will help you understand when you're managing or when you're leading other people. I'll use the word management today. When you're leading other people, you know, how empathetic are you to them? Do you understand what's in it for me? You know, do you think about the people that are working with you? And, you know, do you understand what it is that, you know, what are their needs and what are their ambitions and desires? And you need to, as a leader, you need to know that. Okay. So EQ, big thing to do. And I would say the more you work on that, I think the more self-aware you'll become, and the more you'll manage the burnout. Now, there's another couple of things I'd add to that, Nathan. I'd say, you know, different stages, different leaders, you know, will do different things. You know, we can not be very good at delegating tasks away that other people should be doing. We can work on low value tasks, not high value tasks. So it's very easy for us to suddenly, you know, start to do things because we think it's quicker if we just do it ourselves.
But that's a fly on the wall in our board meeting this morning.
Oh, really? Tell me about that then.
Yeah, it's just a case of at the moment, as you go through a transition of change, you start to maybe prioritize things that are chasing revenue as opposed to what's right for the business. So small project comes in, oh, we'll take that on because we need to plug this sales gap in June because we're trying to go after bigger projects. Therefore, we'll just take that one on, as opposed to actually, no, that's not right. And if we do that, that's going to impact our ability to create new process and get new things in the new pipeline, etc. So I think there's a need for many business owners to try and juggle that commerciality versus process. And that's something we'll come on to a little bit later today, is how do you find that balance between, okay, we need to take time out to get the new process in place, but at the same time, we have lights to keep on and mortgages to pay, and we need to do that at the same time.
Yeah. I mean, that sounds like, the challenge. I think one of the things that you'll recognize, in particular in the agency industry, I mean, this will apply to most industries, but let's talk about agency industry because that's where I am day to day. So my dog's barking, you have to excuse that. What happens is in an agency, typically there's two types of founder. So you get the, oh, it's all going off now. I've got a tractor in the background as well. Just to add, you're 14 months in and it's like, sorry. So two types of founder. You've got and we've run quite a lot of polls on this, so most people are kind of aware of this, but half of the agency founders are entrepreneurs. They're people who've often not worked in agencies before. They may have had sales roles, or they may have had more ideas to start a business typically. And then the other half are kind of the creators, the engineers, and they often they have come from an agency background. Sometimes account managers have come from an agency background, but it's around a 50-50 split. Most people will speak to me going, oh, I feel really embarrassed because I'm running an agency and I've never been in an agency before. And actually, it's a very common thing. But the problem with that is when you have an entrepreneurial founder often running an agency, they want to get everywhere really quick. You'll relate to this, Nathan, right? I know.
Yeah, that's my next question. Yeah, keep going.
But it leads in well. What was the question?
Well, it's just around patience and the inability to have patience because you want everything yesterday, and the balance of narcissism versus success. And like I say, keep going with that point and we'll come back to that because I'm keen to see how, as agency founders, and for everyone listening today, how we can make sure that we find that patience and don't expect results at the click of our fingers or by tomorrow.
So it's interesting because actually I think that the question almost ties in to answer that one and also the previous one around the balance of delivery because, so the entrepreneur founders, they want growth, they want it, they're impatient, they want it now. They'll sometimes do too many things themselves. They take on too much of the wrong stuff because they're trying to chase numbers, et cetera, and that's human nature because they are all about growth and cut through normally as success-driven individuals. Less so money-driven individuals. I don't find that many entrepreneurs are actually money motivated, if I'm honest. I think there are a few. There are different types, but that's a very useful thing to have, by the way, that superpower of having that entrepreneur in the business. But on one extreme, it's quite dangerous because, of course, you can oversell, you can bring the wrong stuff in and the team don't go with you. But then if you counter that and go back the other way and you pick a creative or an engineer, a developer or a strategist, they're going to sit there and they're going to design the systems, the processes. They're going to want to have the right people in first before they find the business. And actually the opposite things happen, which is the business struggles to find the sales because it builds a team and it doesn't have the revenue coming in. They always overly think all of the things internally to the point where actually it's never perfect. It's, you're reiterating all of the time. And it takes like maybe 20, 30 years to get an agency to scale when you run it like that. So it's slower. It's a better business. The service delivery is always much better, but it gets there so slowly that actually the people in the business do start to leave because they don't see the growth. They don't see the business taking on new clients. They don't see, they may not see, and by the way, I'm very generalizing here. There's a million people going, I'm not like that, but I do that. And of course, but as an overview, I see patterns quite clearly. This is a very common thing. A lot of people will recognize this. And the truth is, Nathan, you've got to get in the middle. You have to find that balance of being good at being, having a vision, having a vision that's fast controlled, or growth, I like to use the term, that is a scale up, but isn't maybe a hyper scale up, or because, and by the way, there's nothing wrong with going for hyper scale up. Plenty of people doing that right now, but you've got to realize that lots of things are going to break, and you've got to be prepared to fix those things very quickly and have the energy and the commitment of the team to do that. But the reality is you need to get the balance of the two. You need to get a strong sales pipeline, good momentum. You need to get the delivery mechanism. I do genuinely believe that you have to start with demand first. I don't think you can build supply in an agency and then try and find demand. I think it's a high risk strategy when the wage bills are typically up to 70% of your gross profit. To build a team and wait for then go and find revenue is a very dangerous strategy. No, it is a risky strategy to do that. The better strategy is to find the sales and look for people and try and build the two in tandem, but then try and set some realistic targets that are going to grow at a steady pace. And I think that's the thing for you, I would say, is as long as you're growing, just slow down the growth, fix the delivery side of things. And, you can grow if you have to by 10% a year. It's still going to be 8 times inflation, probably a bit less these days. But, it's still a fast growth rate if you have to, while you fix some things. And then once they're fixed, ramp up the growth and then go up to the 20% a year. I mean, most businesses and agencies try to go for 20% growth and 20% profit as a standard benchmark. So does that answer the question?
That's perfect. I mean, the big question I've been wanting to ask, and actually one of the biggest questions for today, is around ego and narcissism. And we always get quite deep on these LinkedIn lives, and I've got no problem sharing behind the scenes of the agency. That's exactly why we're on today. But actually with success sometimes comes not quite false success, but all of a sudden you start to believe your own hype. You're like, oh my God, we've got from here to here so quickly. And all of a sudden you lose that humility and vulnerability and all those good traits that got you to where you are. The gratitude, it goes out the window because you're suddenly this hungry beast that needs feeding, and essentially you lose all of the good stuff. How did you manage the ego and the narcissistic traits as you grew to where you got to Blue Halo and then exited?
Well, it's a good question, because I think that stage for me actually came in my late 20s before I started my business. I had I left school at 16. I left home at 15. I lived in a bedsit at 16 years old. And so when you start with nothing, no qualifications, I'm working in Top Man. In fact, I'm working in Foster's before Top Man. The point is I didn't really have a lot. And so when I suddenly started to get some success in my career through my 20s, I was managing £20 million businesses by the time I was 23, and 100 staff. And I ended up getting to a point where I was doing quite well in sales roles, that, I'd bring in millions of pounds worth of business. And then my ego took over and I thought I was really good. And so before I set my agency up, I actually got made redundant twice and went through 3 jobs in a year, because Spencer, the blue-eyed boy, suddenly got a little bit too chipper and a bit too egotistical. And I think, be careful here, by the way. Don't misinterpret me as an extrovert for an egotistical person today, because actually if you do any psychometric testing, whether you believe them or not, the reality is actually I'm not a very egocentric person. It's not, there's a personal brand, there's things there, but it's not about me, it's about my clients. And, that wouldn't be the case if I was egocentrical. So, but here's the thing, when I had Blue Halo, I think that I was always quite grounded, because I started with nothing. I ended up losing everything at 28, effectively. I have a great story called The Unlucky Millionaire, where I tell you about all the things that went wrong in my life. And so actually, through the business, I was grateful eternally through that whole journey for everything, because it was not easy. I could have gone out of business 8 times with Blue Halo. I didn't have many times, I mean, probably the most successful time, I remember I landed in Monaco airport to go, Nice airport to go to Monaco to see the launch of the new Subaru rally car. And I had Chelsea Football Club on the phone saying, we want you to build our website and we're not even going to ask you to pitch for it. And I was thinking, I've made it. But even then, I was grounded enough to say, look, I'm sorry, I promised Tottenham that I would give them exclusivity, even though I'm a Chelsea season ticket holder when I won that business, and I'm loyal to them. I'm a loyal person. And, so I think for me, it was okay. So I think it was okay. But these days, Nathan, there's a lot more younger owners starting earlier. And like me, I recognize in their mid to late 20s that actually ego can take over. Look, it happens at all ages. It does. But I think you can believe your own hype and you can end up becoming a little, but the thing that you started off by saying was really fascinating, because you're aware of this, like you're talking about this subject. And so the fact you as a person's talking about it, it means you must be self-aware of these things happening. And therefore that's the key. It's the people who are narcissistic, who become the sort of stereotypical entrepreneurial psychopath or whatever, it ends up, those people, I think they just lack self-awareness and they don't understand how they're coming, they're not givers, it's all about taking everything. And in fact, Abby, who works with us, shared a great article from that book by Adam Grant, Give and Take, which is a fantastic business book. He talks about the givers, the takers, the matchers, the fakers, and that's great. It's great he does that, but the reality is that most people don't realize how they're behaving because they're not self-aware enough to do it. So doing an IQ test or an EQ test will help you, I think, recognize whether you are good or bad at these things, and in turn then get you to work at it better. But I've seen any consultant, Nathan, just one thing to add as well, any consultant out there will tell you that when they work with a client, that the first thing is you're teaching the client, you're showing them stuff. I've had people come to my house as kids who know nothing about anything, spend years, and then at the end of it all, they're like, well, I did it all. You didn't do anything, and you're like, okay, well, that's fine. But, but the really great people are the people that don't forget, the people that go, I'm going to single out someone here now, a guy called Simon Green, who used to work for me at Blue Halo. Came in as a system admin guy. And, he built an incredible business with a couple of others called Wire Hive over the last 11 years. And he brought me as a non-exec, and through thick and thin, the guy, I think turned around about 6 months ago and said, I still remember the first thing you ever said to me was, one day you'll have your own business. And, and I'm really grateful for that because it inspired, that's great. The humility to not forget. The two people that got me where I am today, the entrepreneurs that inspired me, I sent them both messages when I sold my business and said, thank you, because I wouldn't have got where I am today if it hadn't have been for the experience of working with you. And I think that is really important. And too many people forget that, unfortunately, but that's the way it goes.
I think there's a piece that I really like that you said there around the extrovert versus introvert piece. And so many extroverts, I think including myself, sometimes overcompensate as an introvert to just become an extrovert. But it's not like, if you had a choice, do you want to go out and have a billion beers and speak to loads of people, or do you actually just want to be in your own space? You probably might choose your own space. Yet anyone would look at you and go, no chance. You're an extrovert 100%. It's like, you couldn't be further from the truth.
But I'm an introverted thinker. So I have to have quiet time to think, and I'm a slow processor. So I have to go and take time to myself to do things. It's, one of those things where it takes me twice as long to learn anything, I always say. But when I do learn it, I learn it twice as well as anybody else. But I would say, because I'm able to see things from different perspectives. But I think I would say that, you're an example of this. Let's talk about you for a second. Like, when I first heard that you were having all of these meaningful conversations that you were having, I was interested to know what people would say about you, because what they say about your brand is what people say behind your back, I guess. Although I think the more popular you get, unfortunately, the more you naturally develop a Marmite character and some haters. But I think that in your case, I was really delighted. You remember me saying to you how surprised I was, because everyone said, no, he got on the phone with me, but he just listened to what I had to say. And he was really helpful and like genuinely, authentically helpful, and then actually did what he said. And so I think the danger is, I thought wrongly as well, Nathan, because you're extrovert, you get on the phone, you talk for 29 minutes out of 30, you'll all be me. And the reality is it wasn't that at all, right?
And that's something I want to build on today, is about losing the magic sauce, because I think that the process we went through during the pandemic, and some of you will know about it, some of you may not. If you don't, we did an Agency Nomics podcast about this very topic. But actually, so many people I talk to say, I've listened to your Agency Economics podcast. Like, that's awesome. But I think you lose that magic sauce. And actually, during the pandemic, at the time, I began to resent it because we were doing too much and we're burning out. And you were incredibly good to me to have a call and just say that you noticed it from afar. But actually, now I've started to have 2 or 3 agency calls again. And actually, I miss that magic where you are just talking to other people, you're hearing their challenge and you're kind of talking it through. And it's so much easier to diagnose challenges in other people's businesses and introduce other people than it is necessarily to focus on yourself. But yeah, I think that's something that I'll be interested to hear from your experience growing your agency. Was there at any point where you felt like you had something that was really special, but kind of urgent drove out important and you weren't able to stick to it? Like, I wish I could still do that level of conversations, but just the volume of work right now, we just can't do that.
Because you're, the world we're in now, it's like when I had my agency, you couldn't get information on how to grow an agency, right? And most of the competitors in traditional world were competitors, right? They weren't as friendly. I mean, they don't get me wrong, agencies are better than most businesses for bringing people together and, frenemies, I call it. And so today you have access to far more information as a business owner generally, or as an agency owner in particular, because there are all these support systems. So for me, there were so many difficult years in the early stages that when I had the success, I kind of kept thinking that any minute now it's going to go wrong again. And it kept me grounded. So even when I had a year where I didn't lose a pitch, and it felt like Vim, who now runs Giant, and I remember him and I being in the car once going, it's like we've got the Midas touch. Everything we're doing, we're winning every pitch. We're winning everything. The work's brilliant. But 12 months before it was broken, and 12 months later it was broken. And I think the reality is that you can't get complacent when you run a business, because the moment you get complacent, the business kicks back. And so you have to keep yourself in a position, I feel, where you feel like, that it's always a constant journey of improvement. Things will go wrong. You'll fix them. They'll go wrong again. I think with the cool stuff that you were doing, I think it was great. Obviously, you got to huge volumes of calls very early on in your early agency growth, because you did the right thing and listened to all the stuff I've been ranting on about for 10 years, where everyone was just taking the mickey out of me saying, that's just nonsense.
And does that frustrate you, Spencer, just on that point, that the blueprint is there and actually so many people have trodden the path? Yeah, I don't know if it's ego or what, but so many people are like, oh, I see what Spencer's talking about there. I see what Pete's mentioned here, but actually I'm going to go and do it my way. And you're like, well, why do it your way when I've shown you how to do it?
Well, I think, I think there's still to this day, the most successful people that I've worked with that have had successful outcomes, and I've only really just started talking about this recently. I've helped co-curate, I believe now, 36 millionaires in 6 years. And those people have all shared one common characteristic, which is they'll always try, things that we suggest as a board. They won't fight them. I think the main reason is the subconscious, the voice in their head. I think most people have a subconscious that is at odds with their consciousness, and they have someone in the back of their head saying, "No, you don't want to do that. You shouldn't do that. That's not going to work. He doesn't know what he's talking about." And that voice in the back of the head is what holds people back. And the moment you can get into the moment and you can lose that voice out of your head, and you can learn to trust people that have trodden the path that you want to tread before you, then I believe that, there's no risk, because I don't share what I think with people. I only share what I've seen over the past, 25 years of seeing agencies working, and 30 years of work, plus all years of working. So I'm not stupid enough to share things that don't work. I think the misnomer, you and I had a chat about this the other day, was that some people think that I only have one way to grow a business. I've actually got 39 different ways to scale an agency, and some, and I have a favorite few in there that would suit you, and they're the ones that you get to see. But there are other people who have to take different approaches. So for me, when they don't do if they don't take that advice, I've got to sometimes look, firstly, is it them? Is it the way? Are they going to be a Martin Sorrell? Are they better off just aggregating and buying businesses and, being behind the scenes? Or are they better to, to grow through acquisition? Or are they better to grow through the work? Or are they better to, so I've got to look at that a bit. But what I would say to you around that whole subject is that I think, the fact that you listened and you did it was great for me, because in a way I needed a new case study, because I sold my agency 10 years ago, right? So actually to be able to go, there you go, it still works. Here's a live model. In fact, you'd refine my way, I think made it better. But the difference with you and I was you did it much earlier. And so you were doing so many calls because you were so much earlier. But I think when I started, I only needed to do 50, which is 2 calls a day. And that really was enough. And I hope now you've optimized, and probably you have, I'm going to guess. Yeah, you've cut back.
Yeah.
But you mustn't lose the core base ever, because no matter how big you become, even today with Cactus, I still have 2 to 3 calls every day with new people. And that momentum just keeps, delivering.
I mean, we've talked a lot about the meaningful conversations, and I don't want to talk about it too much today because there's loads of content you and I have done together on it. But there is one piece here around the people that are going just to tick the box, and so they're having easy conversations as opposed to the right conversations. So it's just like, okay, well, I'm going to speak to my brother, my mum, and my dog because there's 3 conversations and I can do them really quickly. It's like, well, they're not the ones that are going to drive growth. It's putting yourself out of your comfort zone and saying, go and find the agency X that I've never spoken before or client.
And that's why in the book I wrote new conversations. You use the words mean. I mean, I started using the word meaningful a few years ago, but you really adopted that word meaningful, and I think I say new because that stops that gamification of it a little bit.
Yeah, so one topic I'm going to tackle with you today is around presenteeism, and that's something that we don't often talk about as owner founders, particularly in the agency world. But because there is so much going on in agency life, when you then leave the agency office, you go home, it's very, very difficult to sometimes be present because your mind is always going about other stuff. Did you manage, and I suppose probably better to ask Leslie than yourself, but did you manage to remain present during that growth? Or actually, did you have times where you just couldn't switch off from all that was going on?
So the honest answer, it's funny because my wife had a business before I did. So when I was working, and I remember she used to walk in from work and she'd say, just don't talk to me. And I'd go, what? Just don't talk to my girlfriend then. Don't talk to me. And I would say, shit. And I recognized that. And then a few years later, I'm running the business and I'm coming in. I've had a very difficult day. My head's, I'm trying to swear on LinkedIn Live. And I would, sometimes the commute home would help if it was long, a bit of loud music and you'd wind down. And, but the reality is I recognize that I had that too. I'm not unique. I think most senior leaders in most organizations will have difficult days at work, often more difficult days than good days at work. And when they come home, there's a transition. Now, here's something that I'm going to share with you, which I only learned about 6 months ago. And I've got to tell you, like, for me, this was an epiphany. Apparently, when you become a GP or when you become a psychotherapist, you actually spend a huge amount of your training being taught about not taking your work home. Because if you take your work home with you, it will eat away at you and kill you, right? I might be dramatizing a bit there, but I'll do that a little bit every now and then. So what they do is they create end-of-day routines and they recommend end-of-day routines. And so they spend a lot of time working on that. I was told this by a friend of a friend, and he said, we spent the first year of our training learning how to deal with the kind of that end of day routine. Now, as you know, I've got a lot of friends who are quite successful in big businesses. And when I go to dinner sometimes in the evening, I'll recognize what you just said. They won't be present. They'll be there, but they won't be there because their head's still in the day and it's taking 2 or 3 hours to wind down. So what I started doing myself only 3-4 months ago, just to be clear about this, because normally in the past I've put that down to needing a holiday, is especially with lockdown, was I started to create an end-of-day routine. So you always hear people talk about start-of-day routines, don't you? You go, well, I get up, I meditate, I climb a mountain at 4:30, and then by 6:30 I'm eating my granola in front of the river with my Buddha or whatever.
I guess like a warm down for a sports team though, right? You've got to warm up as well as warming down after the
game. Exactly. Think of it like a warm down. But, for me now, my clothes day, I have quite a good clothes. So I'll go and have a shower. I'll get changed. Because in the old days, you'd wear suits to work and then you come home and get changed. And we don't do that anymore. So I physically now have about a half an hour, 45-minute like changeover period. So the day stops. I go and do something that is going to just by myself, just unwind and then get myself going into that frame of mind in the evening. You know, maybe make a list of all the things that are in my mind, by the way, if I have to do tomorrow. I know that I'm actually more effective working early in the morning. So I tend now to try and stop trying to fix things late in the evening, because actually, you know, I'd rather do it at 8 o'clock and do it in half an hour than do it at 5 o'clock and take 2 hours. But everyone's different, of course. So yeah, I would say definitely if people are struggling with that, get an end of day routine. And the other thing is, and this happened with someone I'm mentoring at the moment, where she, a very successful entrepreneur, she scaled her business, you know, like you guys really, from a very early stage to $1 million in a very short period of time. And she got herself a PA. And actually, I remember her saying, my life is transformed. I'm not working weekends or evenings anymore. I've learned to delegate. And so sometimes there are things like that that could help you, I think, you know, to be able to help switch off at the end of the day, know that somebody else is going to take over some of those tasks or remind you tomorrow that they exist. Does that answer your question? So I think creating an end of day routine is probably the best way to deal with it.
That's perfect. I think one thing I'm keen to talk to you about as well is around feeding and being fed, and actually due to, I don't know if it's your character type or whatever, but I remember back 4 or 5 years ago when I just very started my first agency, I actually had a phone call with yourself and I sat in the car and you were talking to me about what you were doing and how you went about it, and encouraged me to go and read certain books and everything else. But actually, you seem to always be feeding rather than being fed yourself. Do you ever resent that and get to the point where you're like, you know, and I found that, to be honest, with the agency conversations, there came a point where we talked about it so much that actually people were then coming for all the wrong reasons. Back when we started, it was really nice and people took them for what they were. Whereas at the end, it was like, okay, where's the intros? Where's the stuff you talk about? I was like, well, hold on, dude. I want to talk about your business first. I want to find out about you. I don't just dish them out. How have you found that balance between helping people and supporting people versus actually getting help and support yourself?
Well, I think you tend to sort of know the true givers, right? When that happens, like, you know, if you are a true giver, you don't really care whether people help out back or not. That said, if you have a little bit of emotional intelligence, you'll notice that in life we will have certain people who will take advantage of that generosity and that kindness. And so there are times when it's difficult with us, you know, a very small percentage of people who maybe are kind of trying to draw from you too much when you're trying to help people and things aren't reciprocal. But generally speaking, I mean, for me, I mean, when I was younger, I probably worried about it more. But now, I think one of the great things about as you go towards the end of your 40s, and I'm just 50 now, so now I'm properly old. I'm the proper age to be a non-exec, whereas at 40, I was too young. But late 40s, you can worry too much about stuff. The great thing about, you know, if you could ever give yourself, the younger version of yourself, any advice, you say, don't worry as much, right? Because now you're like, you know, it's just nothing matters. It really doesn't matter at the end of the day. So yeah, what am I trying to say to you here? I think that you know, helping others is definitely got to be the first thing to do. Of course, you know, how do you then feed yourself? Well, I think you
invested in yourself, right? With the personal branding stuff we see, and we'll talk about that shortly. Yeah. The JJ boys, like, finally you're starting to say, you know what, I'm going to invest in myself rather than keep helping and supporting everyone else and taking notes.
I guess what everyone doesn't see, and what you don't see, is my inner circle. So I have, you know, 6 friends who all owned agencies. All 5 of them have sold their agencies. I don't know how we all gravitated together, because we knew each other before. And you know, what's that Jim Rohn saying? Is it, you know, you are the sum of the 5 best people you know?
Yeah.
But weirdly, and I remember there was a photograph taken of us at Barrington House, and I went, and I had this eureka moment where I went, look at my inner circle of close friends. Actually, they're all very successful people. We all support each other. We challenge each other. We educate each other. and actually there is this mutual respect that happens from people that have also gone through the similar journey and are probably now doing the similar post-exit journey or their second business, like, we are now a Cactus. And so I think, you will get your own support groups. Hopefully everyone has their own support groups. I think it's difficult. There's a lot of stuff talked about, us having, society, us all having a lack of friends and having a lack of close friends, things like that. I think agencies are great because you can form some really good friendships. I mean, you've got good friendships with Marcus, haven't you?
Yeah, I mean, Marcus and Vim and Laurent and all these people that actually, I think you realize that age no longer becomes a factor. I think when we started back when I was 18, 17, and actually you think to yourself, okay, well, they're never going to talk to me because why would they? They're double my age, whatever. But actually, all of a sudden, you're all on a level playing field. You've got that common ground. And that's the big thing that Agency Nomics gave us, particularly when reaching out to people, is you had that bit of common ground. So you could just go to someone and say, hey, I too share this common thing. Let's have a conversation. And that opened the door. And that's the big thing that many people don't have when they reach out to myself or anyone, is they don't have that point of kind of conversation starting to say, we both share this common ground. Let's have a conversation.
Yeah, and I love that friendship you've got, because everyone, I can see that little group, and there are lots of you out there listening who have these really great groups. A lot of them, some of them come from agencies, some come from outside, but sometimes you need that empathy, don't you? From a business owner perspective, sometimes it's very hard. I've got friends who've got their close circle of friends are not business owners, and they just don't understand. They can't empathize, understand what it's like. They just think it's.
I think that plus equals minus model we talk about a lot with those guys. And talk of the devil, here he is. And Marcus just said, thanks, mate. We certainly do have a good friendship, cracking content. Good to see you, mate. So, the main thing I would say with those is we talk about the plus equals minus model. And this is a model actually, Marcus, I think taught me about and probably learned from yourself or someone else that he'd read. But we were saying that actually for Laurent, for Marcus, for those people that I consider very dear friends, actually, they, as soon as you realize, they probably get something out of it as well, because they're teaching someone a little bit earlier on in their journey, and they're saying, you know what? Yeah, cool, that's a different challenge. I remember when we had that. This is what I would have done differently, and vice versa. There's a really beneficial to support those that are coming up through the ranks, and unfortunately, we don't see that enough, in my opinion, in agency. Now we're seeing it a bit more, but actually, that time to say, you know what? There's a startup over here. Let's give them a bit of help. Let's show them, hopefully, help them to cut some corners. And to give them that leg up, because aside before agency, there was nothing.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because when people say to me, "Well, how at the end of the call, how can I help you?" I just say, "Look, one day when you do well, pay it forwards." And I think, I don't know. Like, I sometimes look at what my purpose is right now, because it could be many different things, but ultimately, what I'm trying to do is help support an ecosystem of the now, next, and future generation of agencies to be successful. And ultimately, I hope that those ones that, and by the way, success means different things to different people. And I don't mean, making loads of money. I just mean they build something that they can be proud of. And I want one day for them to look back and to then, like it was with me. I mean, I fondly talk about Graham Darracott, who's now Up Agency, who back in the day was an owner of an agency called Graphico down the road in Newbury. And, he gave me little bits of advice along the way that just helped me understand what the problems were going to happen next. If he hadn't have done that, I wouldn't have got where I am today, and we're still friends today. So I think, I think the right people, the givers, and it is the in my opinion, the way that as humans should be. We should be helpful to everyone around us. I think ultimately help and support the next generation and share with them your mistakes. Don't share with them all the successes. Like,
what are your thoughts on the topic of luck? Because actually, and that's kind of why I wanted to put together this series, and why I'm glad that Marcus is participating, and Laurent and Vim and all these people, because actually there is a certain amount of luck, but you make your own luck. And I'm a big believer in that. And actually, you've got to be prepared to have the conversations to get yourself in the front foot and to go and do these things. What are your thoughts on luck? Do you think that many agency owners get to their sales through luck, or actually is luck a massive distraction, and it's not luck at all?
Oh, I mean, I think this universe is a strange old thing, and I don't think I've met anyone ever. Maybe there's one or two people, but not many, who can't put down some new business win down to a fortuitous opportunity that serendipitously happened. I mean, my first ever major win as an agency owner came through a massive piece of serendipity and luck and coincidence. And I think, I mean, so I think it plays part of it. I think I think that, in the old days, it was Gary Player, the golfer, saying, the more I practice, the better, or the luckier I get.
Yeah.
And then it kind of got adapted. The harder I work, the luckier I get. And then there's been the haters now, because it's cool to hate things these days, Nathan, right? So these days, 50% of people will love an idea and 50% will bring it down. It's just one of those things. But, now it's not about working hard to become lucky, because that's not good for your mental health. Well, actually, if you love what you do and you work hard and you're self-aware, like me, you won't have a mental health breakdown, because actually you'll be working hard on yourself and your mind and your meditation, and you'll be doing those things, running, and the things that help us. And of course, there are complicated areas of mental health, I understand, that aren't always necessarily caused by work, but where people have a go at the work thing. So from my perspective, being very positive here, I think, luck does play a part. I think we've all been in life where things just seem to go right. And we've all been in life where things just seem to go wrong. And the best book, if you haven't read it, is The Luck Factor by Dr. Richard Wiseman. And he tells a great story in there. And I'm gonna paraphrase this and probably get it a little bit wrong. But when you read the book, you'll get the exact story. He gets a room of 50 people, puts it into two halves. Who's lucky, who's unlucky? First thing he does, he buys everyone a lottery ticket, and he sees if the lucky people are going to win the lottery more likely than the unlucky, and they don't. So he proves that mathematically there's no thing to luck there. But then what he does is he invites some lucky people and unlucky people to come to the BBC studios, where he tells them he's running a documentary. And he says to them all, when they turn up, sorry, individually, you're a bit early. There's a cafe over the road. Could you go to the cafe, get a cup of coffee, and we'll call you over and we'll interview you shortly. As the people go over, they put a £10 note on the floor just outside the cafe. Now, the lucky people, every one of them picks up the £10 note, goes in the cafe, buys the cup of coffee with the £10 note, and then sits down and starts a conversation with one of the three people that have been set-pieced inside that cafe. And one of them is a businessman with an opportunity for them, okay? The people who said they were unlucky didn't see the £10 note on the floor, skipped over it, went in, had a cup of coffee by themselves, and didn't talk to anybody else. So when you talk about making your own luck, first of all, by believing you're lucky, by believing you find pennies on the floor, or you find 4-leaf clovers more than other people, or when you believe you're lucky, you're more open, your physiology, your psychology, everything about you changes. If someone says to me, am I lucky? I say, yeah, I'm lucky. Yeah, it's not, I'm lucky, but does that really mean anything? I don't know. But things go my way, but do I work hard? Am I always looking out for coincidences, for opportunities, for connections? Yeah, I am. And have there been times in my life where I've had bad luck, where everything's gone wrong and my head's been down and I've missed things and the voice in my head has told me things that I don't want to hear about myself? Yeah, of course. And so really, I think the state of mind that you get yourself into will help you become more lucky ultimately. And yes, it will, success is exponential. It's what people get wrong as well. Like the more you work at something and the more successful you become, the more it grows exponentially. But actually, people just think, oh yeah, it's like a destination, but it's not like that,
Crashing back down to...
You sound like you know more about luck than me, but I would recommend everyone reads the book by Dr. Richard Wiseman, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the main reasons, Spencer, I reached out initially. It's so humbling to be asked by students to go and speak at universities and colleges, and I go back to school and I do all these things. And that is really, as my own character trait, that is massively rewarding for me, and I really get a buzz out of it. But what I want to show people is that actually this is luck to some extent, for sure. You've got to be in the right place at the right time, but actually it's possible for anybody. Like, surround yourself with the right people, do some of the things we talked about today, and actually bringing your knowledge to this webinar is perfect, because people can say, actually, There's nothing special. I was just the same as everybody else. The reason that we're doing what we're doing is because we're prepared to invest, and we invested in ourselves. And now you look at things like agencynomics now, you look at the book, you look at the network, those people that are investing in themselves and really paying it forwards and doing all those good things are the ones getting the results. It is a formula. It's not so much about luck, and it's not something that, oh, you can do because you had this schooling or whatever. It's not like that at all. Now,
I've got a podcast actually next with Mills Banji from an agency called, do you know Tappin? Have you met him? I don't know.
No, I haven't. I can't believe it.
No, I was going to say that must be the first person that I've met that you haven't.
No.
Oh my God! What? Sorry, I just lost my train of thought then saying it, and there was a reason why I said his name, because something. Or something about making your own luck, wasn't it? Oh, I mean, it's funny how those. He read the book, he reached out to me. I then saw him on social media, thought his content was brilliant. Oh, I know what I was going to say. Work ethic. I think. He's Gen Z, and he works in the Gen Z space, helping talent attraction and really helping to hopefully transform the way diversity and inclusivity is taken inside businesses in terms of recruitment and talent and employee branding. Brilliant agency. I love what he's doing. Love where he's at. It's a very early stage, but booming very quickly. But the thing is that I think from what I've seen so far, I feel like the Gen Zs they're going to get it better than maybe the previous generations of workers, because I think there definitely has been more awareness of mental health issues, and there's definitely been more issues and challenges. Of course, COVID hasn't really helped any of us. I mean, I've suffered early on this year. I was definitely suffering from being locked down. And as I said, I'm normally quite resilient, but I do believe that there are going to be better ways to deal with mental health. We're getting more awareness. There's certainly going to be transformations in the way that psychedelics help, and that's going to be 10 years away from now, but that will transform the way that I think people will manage their own through that will be able to manage their own mental health much more effectively and practically. But I also think from what I've seen of the Gen Zs, they've got a much better work-life balance and mix. Like I've seen this kind of like, they like experiences, but they work hard, but they also rest hard. And I see some characteristics in the new generation. I'm generalizing here, but I'm going to pick Mills's brains on it more, where I actually see a lot of things getting better in the future. I see hope. I really do.
So one of the topics we'll talk about and just a reminder to everyone listening, this is one of a 3-part series. The next is on the 18th of June. But one is around the importance of niching and redefining the proposition. Now, today we've focused a lot around mindset, and that's what today's talk will be about. But just as a heads up for those listening for the next session, which, like I say, is 18th of June, 9 o'clock, we'll be looking and talking about side hustles. And that's something I talk to a lot of owner founders about, is this kind of shiny thing over here of actually, I'm doing this agency, but there's got to be an easier way. There's got to be, the grass is always greener. So it's like, I've just helped a client scale their business exponentially. I'm suddenly going to go and create something myself. Or suddenly, because I've built a Shopify site, I suddenly think I'm a guru and can help everyone in the world with their e-com store. And so my question to you is, how did you avoid the side hustles? And what do you say to those people that are running agencies, but are getting greedy and thinking, actually, I can do this for myself. I can go and have 2 or 3 side hustles. It really is the importance of focus.
So newsflash, I didn't avoid the side hustles. I did them, and I learned my lesson the hard way. I'm like everybody else. I mean, people will always hear me say, just focus on one thing, because 99.9% of entrepreneurs self-sabotage their success by creating side hustles. Because they end up spreading themselves too thin. Everyone's moaning that they're working too hard and it affects their mental health. But let's go and start another business, because that's a really good idea, isn't it? So there's a brilliant book called Just the One Thing. Most entrepreneurs will probably read 20 pages of that book and stop like I did, because you get the idea after 20 pages. But, I did. I built the e-commerce platform before Magento came out. We built a loan application process, the first one to process secured loan applications online. We built these other businesses. I put a recruitment company together, and every time, when I look back at that time, it deflected me away from growing my successful business. And the moment I stopped all of the side hustles, or when I didn't focus on the side hustles, guess what happens? And I would say honestly that 8 out of 10 businesses I go into that have one, first thing we do, we lose a side hustle, business starts growing, and it's just a quick fix. If you've got a side hustle, fine, it's not a problem, but you've got to find someone else to run it. And you've got to go to a board meeting, like I go to board meetings, go there for a 1 hour a month board meeting or 2 hour a month board meeting, and be there as an investor, just like you might invest in the stock market and attend to your finances and check in how they're doing every month, if as long as you're not a day trader. So I would say, personally, are there people with successful side hustles? There are a couple, but I'm going to tell you now, every single one of my successful friends and people that I've met on my journey who are very successful only have one business. Once you've built and sold a business, you can work on multiple businesses. It's possible. That's what I do now. I work on multiple businesses, but at a cost. Like Cactus isn't a multi-million-pound business because that's not my game. But if I stopped focusing on the business and focused on my own, it would scale very quickly. So that's my advice. And I think most people will go through this. Now, if you can't make an agency work, you're probably unlikely to make a product business work. Like if you can't make the agency work, then you're unlikely, you haven't got, from what I've seen, most people who then go, oh, it's easy to have a product business. They go, it's a real shock. Having said that, I've met people that have done that. They've got rid of their agency. They've started product business and it's grown. There are not many that I've seen go on and do it successfully. Like I'm talking less than 5, and I'm probably out of 1,000. When I say 1,000, probably a good 100 people I know that have pivoted to products from services. Only 5% maybe have actually gone on to work. If that, I mean, if I'm honest, it's probably less. So try to avoid distractions is my advice. But you don't have to take it. I mean, it's your business.
And that's the piece I want to finish on today, Spencer. Unfortunately, we're getting towards the end of time, but it's just around self-belief and the point of it is just your advice, and actually people are perfectly able to go and tread their own path. But the reason we're doing this is to show people that there are people that have been there, seen it, done it, that have shared the blueprint. And actually, if you do anything, if you just listen to 5 minutes of this, just go and check out the Agency Novice community, get the book, have a read, just go and see people that have been there, seen it, done it, and then don't be prepared to reach out and ask for help. But the final thing for me today is really around dealing with the haters, because as you've grown and scaled, you will start to have people, like you say, that Marmite personality. Some people will love it, some people will hate it. And for some people, that can be crippling. You can be absolutely crippled. And I would say to some extent I am, that as we grow and scale, and if we continue to grow and scale on the trajectory that I'm hoping for, I am crippled by the thought of a lot of people out there speaking not very nicely about you. How do you deal with that?
It's not easy. I've had people attack me in the last 6 months, and I take it, and I have been guilty in the past of taking things personally. I think I would say, as I said, the last couple of years, you learn to care a little bit less, and that's just one of those things. And maybe the more you get to see it, the more there is context. I probably every day get someone thanking me in some shape or form for help I've done, and that negates any negativity. But I think it is, I'm not going to lie, it can affect me, and it does. And I'm sure it affects most people. And as much as everyone says, oh, you shouldn't, or, why should it affect you? I am human at the end of the day, and if people lie about you behind your back, it hurts, right? Because you want to be able to defend your reputation and you want to be able to defend, but, actually it's their problem, not yours. And, I just read a book called The 4 Agreements. If you haven't read it, I feel like I'm promoting loads of books.
I was going to say the library's having a field day.
But The 4 Agreements is great. I think it teaches you not to basically, I won't read them all out now. But the bottom line is, I think I'm now learning that the black magic that other people speak about you negatively, that's their own demons and their own issues. And I'm just going to let them deal with it from now on. And I'm just going to try and do my best to keep helping people. And what I would say to you is you've got to take the same philosophy in other people, which is as you become bigger, more successful, the vast majority of people are going to appreciate and be grateful for everything you've done for them, right? But
that's the thing, right? It's being about having gratitude. Yeah. Yeah, I'm just a massive challenge at the moment is just just being accepting and grateful for what you have rather than keep chasing the next thing, and actually creating this false universe where you're like, oh, what if this happens? What if this person doesn't like me? Before you know it, you've created a whole world that doesn't exist. And so back to being present, back to living in the moment, and also just about being grateful for what you do have.
I mean, I think I listen, when I had Blue Halo, I never had any problems anywhere. I've got to tell you, as an agency owner, you're okay. Everyone agency owners have got each other's backs. They love each other and they're grateful. They are. I mean, there are very few idiots in agency life. Honestly, owners, there are very few. There are some, but they're very few. And so I think you're okay. I think it's a lot harder when you become a consultant. I mean, because they're not all friends like, other businesses. Everyone's criticizing you, your perspective or whatever. So I think, I actually think you'll be okay. And I think if you're in an agency world, you'll be fine. I think actually the ecosystem of agencies is so wide and so diverse that very few of you really compete directly with things.
I mean, this is a topic in itself around competition. Actually, if you look at price point, availability, skill set, all that good stuff, very rarely do you find someone that does exactly what you do. But let's save that for next time. Guys, it's been an hour. Thank you so much for those that have joined us. Thank you all for your lovely feedback that's coming through. We really appreciate it. We'll be back for this 3-part series on the 18th of June at 9 o'clock. Until then, keep your questions coming. Message on LinkedIn. I'll do whatever I can to ask the questions as I go, but hopefully you're all taking great value. But if you leave today with anything, it's just don't be afraid to go out and do it. Follow those that have already been there, seen it and done it. Ask for help. And remember, you can only do what you can do, and just be happy with your lot. Spencer, it's a real pleasure as always. Thank you so much for your time. Good to catch up, and I will see you all soon.
It's great to see you. Thanks so much for having me on.
Cheers, mate.